Testing. Can everybody hear me okay? Yeah? Okay. Well, good evening, everybody. I just want to say, Hini Karigi Wina. Welcome to tonight's event, to the Restoring Indigenous Food Sovereignty panel. My name is Jordana Bass. My Ho-Chunk name is Hatujamani Winga, and I come from the Bear Clan of the Winnebago Tribe of Nebraska, and I'm also the project coordinator at Vision Maker Media. This event is presented by Nebraska Public Media in partnership with Durham Museum and Vision Maker Media. Additional community partners include the Center for Great Plains Studies. Vision Maker Media is a premier source of public media by and about Native Americans since 1976. Our mission is empowering and engaging Native people to share stories. We envision a world changed and healed by understanding Native stories and the public conversations that they generate. We work with Vision Maker Media funded producers to develop, produce, and distribute programs for all public media. We support trainings to increase the number of Native Americans and Alaska Natives producing public broadcasting programs. A key strategy for this work is in partnership with tribal nations and Native organizations and communities. Vision Maker Media is a local nonprofit established and located in Lincoln, Nebraska. We are funded in part by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. If you'd like to know more information, please visit our booth after the panel. And now I'd like to introduce Dr. Rudy Mitchell for the opening prayer. A little bit about Dr. Rudy Mitchell. He is an enrolled member of the Umó̤ho̤ Indian Nation of the states of Nebraska and Iowa. He is a retired faculty member of Creighton University. Prior to his employment at Creighton University, he worked 35 years on the 2 Indian reservations in northeast Nebraska in the area of social services and mental health. He is the oldest formal chairman of the Umó̤ho̤ Nation and a great-great-great-grandson of Chief Big Elk. He is the oldest veteran of the Umó̤ho̤ Nation and served during the Vietnam conflict in the U.S. Army Medical Corps. Medical Corps. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Rudy Mitchell.
Thank you. Wangeda uda diati wishti uda diho Umó̤ho̤ jaja wibita sihiduba. Before I begin the prayer, I want to thank Durham Museum and all those connected tonight with this event. I think it's really appropriate they're having it during Native American Month, and I want to commend them for doing that. In my Umó̤ho̤ Indian culture, we always stand for the word of prayer. So would you all please stand and offer a word of prayer? I'm going to start off in my Umó̤ho̤ Indian language. As Native people, we always feel that we're much more closer to God if we talk in our native language. So I'm going to offer a word of prayer at this time. Dadiho Wakanda, Dadiho Jesus, Diamuska Diagde, Duam Wangadam Ati Dadiho, Wangadam Laedakte Dadiho, Sham Walgam Ati Dadiho, Laedakte Dadiho, Sham Ukitam Ati Dadiho, Wangadam Laedakte Dadiho, Sham Wakegam Daedakte Dadiho, Weave the hand that the Ati. Father, as we gather this evening, we offer our words to you, and we ask that you would hear our words tonight. Be with each one of our panel members as they talk about the food sovereignty in which a lot of our forefathers had for existence many, many, many years ago. Today, Father, it's really important that in our diet today that we try to take care of ourselves and provide better nourishment for our bodies. There's many illnesses that Native American people face, diabetes being one of them. So, Father, we ask that the knowledge that's going to be shared tonight, that somehow we can make a way for all of our people that we come in contact with to help improve our lives. Again, Father, bless each one of our panel members and each one that's here tonight, Father. I pray that you bless them with good health, And I pray for world peace in the Middle East and in Europe, Father. My prayers every morning or night for those people over there that somehow it can be resolved, the differences between the countries. Again, Father, as we depart in the four winds tonight, we ask that you would be with us to take care of us and watch over us in the future. And we ask this all in your Son's name. Amen.
Good evening. We still have a few folks making their way down, so I'm going to maybe stall just a tiny bit. First of all, I'd like to thank Dr. Mitchell. Thank you. It was an honor for you to be here with us tonight. Can we have a round of applause for Dr. Mitchell? I'm Molly Delaney. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer at Nebraska Public Media, and I'm so happy to see so many people in the audience this evening. Thank you all for joining us. Thanks for coming out. This event is a partnership between Nebraska Public Media, the Durham Museum, and Vision Maker Media. And when I walked in this room tonight, I thought, wow, those logos all look really good together, don't they? It's if it's meant to be. We couldn't ask for better partners to help plan an event that blends Nebraska history with Indigenous and Native cultures today. We're especially grateful to Don Myron and Kim Henze of the Durham Museum. Where are Don and Kim? Back up there. Francine Blythe-Lewis, Julianna Brannum, and Alana Stone, and Whitney, and I'm going to try to say this right, Whitney, Yakamowitz. Did I come anywhere close?
Yeah, that's close.
Okay. Whitney, tell us how to say your name.
It's
Yakimovich. Okay, very good. Thank you. And Whitney, all of those women are at Vision Maker Media. We're filming this today, and it will be made available for later viewing, courtesy of Vision Maker Media. So you can look for that video to be posted on their YouTube channel. It should be coming up in the next few days, but we'll share a link with everyone who is here tonight so you have the opportunity to watch it or share it with others that you think might enjoy it. I also want to thank Dr. Margaret Jacobs and the Center for Great Plains Studies. They've been wonderful community partners for this event. And for our companion project, if you haven't heard about this yet, the Nebraska Public Media Book Club Kit, which features Dan O'Brien's Great Plains Bison and Rebekka Schlichting's Seed Warriors film, and both of them are on our panel today. If you didn't pick up a bookmark in the lobby, I recommend that you do so, so that you can put that book club kit on your list for your next book club event. As we start tonight's event, we want to take a moment to acknowledge the history of the land we are on today. Nebraska Public Media is a statewide network of public radio and television stations and part of the University of Nebraska, a public land-grant institution with campuses and programs across the state. We reside on the past, present, and future homelands of the Pawnee, Ponca, Missouri, Omaha, Dakota, Lakota, Arapaho, Cheyenne, and Cobb peoples, as well as the relocated Ho-Chunk, Iowa, Sac, and Fox peoples. This knowledge allows us to better understand that our opportunity to serve Nebraskans through our programming and to occupy these lands is the result of a history of Native and Indigenous peoples' experience of displacement, violence, settlement, and survival, which continues to inform our present and future. Tonight's event is an opportunity to reflect on this legacy and the many paths that have brought us all here together today. In that spirit, we want to show you a short video that explains some of the context behind tonight's event. This event was inspired by the recent Ken Burns documentary, The American Buffalo, which premiered last month. It's a fascinating biography of our national mammal that covers more than 10,000 years of North American history and tracing the mammal's evolution, its significance to the Great Plains, and most importantly, its relationship to the indigenous people of North America. Here, Ken Burns and some of the other experts behind the project talk about what inspired them to make the film and what they hope it will achieve.
When you look at a buffalo, you just don't see a big shaggy beast. You see life, you see existence. Those are our relatives. They are part of us.
This is the most magnificent mammal on our continent. Its story is so interesting and touches on so many subjects you wouldn't think it would touch on.
I wanted to do the American buffalo because it's the biography of an animal, but it's also a window into a broader American history. The history of indigenous people, capitalism, westward expansion. How do we live with the natural world?
When the Europeans come in, everything that's natural has to get out of the way.
It's incredibly dramatic. Just the notion that a magnificent animal that once was uncountable could be in a century taken down to fewer than 1,000. How does that happen?
To think that our greed and our industrialization would just blink this thing out and we would just say, well, that was then and this is now.
I think that this nation is now ready to hear a more honest and balanced telling of this tragic story. We just need to tell the truth and move forward in a way that allows indigenous people and bison and the entire environment of this nation to heal and restore itself.
We need the buffalo on this earth to survive as people, not just Indians. We need that spirit.
I think the film is really a kind of mirror to us about who we are. Who do we wish to be? Do we wish to be the savers, or do we wish to be the destroyers? I'm really thrilled to be able to tell as complex and as tragic, and I have to say as inspirational as this story is.
So if you haven't watched it yet, the full film is available to watch at pbs.org/American Buffalo. It's also on the free PBS video app, so I encourage you to watch the full documentary. Today's event seeks to tease out some of those threads from the documentary, particularly how we relate to the natural world. Tonight, we'll look at the work being done to restore indigenous food sovereignty and native lifeways that is happening right here in Nebraska. So without further ado, I'm pleased to welcome our panel to the stage. So Brandon Cobb. Brandon is a member of the Cherokee Nation and Indigenous Conservation Specialist at the Nature Conservancy's Nebraska office. So Brandon?
Osio, Brandon Cobb, Dawa Doa. I'd like to begin first by saying I apologize for speaking in front of all of the elders with us today. It's a great privilege to be here and it's an honor. My name is Brandon Cobb. I'm a citizen of the Cherokee Nation, like was mentioned, and I work with the Conservancy here in Nebraska. I come from a long line of Cherokee ranchers going back 4 generations, and so I'm the 5th generation continuing to work on the land. And I primarily do all of our tribal partnership work here in Nebraska with different tribal nations. So thank you for having me.
And then Suzi French. Suzi's a member of the Umó̤ho̤ Nation and farm-to-school director for the Umó̤ho̤ Nation Public School.
Hi, I'm Suzi French. I am an enrolled member of the Umó̤ho̤ Tribe of Nebraska, where I am the director of a 7-acre farm where we teach our K through 12 students how to grow food, preserve it, get back to our traditional food systems, including Indian corn, buffalo, pumpkins, just about everything. I work with the JAG program with Mr. Ricardo Ariza. I'm also the only Native American woman farmer on my reservation, so Hey. And
and author and bison rancher Dan O'Brien, who is featured in The American Buffalo, and the author of the book that is part of our book club kit.
Yeah, Dan O'Brien. I live up between the Badlands and the Black Hills. I'm basically a writer, but I've also worked as a biologist. And the last 20 years, 25 years, 30 years, I guess, I've been trying to figure out a way to raise buffalo without putting them in feedlots or slaughter plants. And that's all I know.
And then filmmaker Rebekka Schlichting, a member of the Ioway tribe of Kansas and Nebraska, an assistant professor of the practice at the University of Kansas School of Journalism.
Hawaii. Wow. It's a good day, my relatives. Thank you for having me, Rebekka Schlichting, Iowa tribe, Kansas and Nebraska. And
And I welcome our moderator, Renée Souci, a member of the Umó̤ho̤ Nation and an Indigenous educator and cultural consultant.
Good evening, everyone. Wow, that is loud. Ewe de wongile. Umó̤ho̤ ijaje wiwita te shonge chube wa u. Wache ijaje wiwita te Renée Souci. Umó̤ho̤ wa ubli. And I said my Umó̤ho̤ name is Sacred Horsewoman. My English name or white man name is Renée Souci. And I'm an Umó̤ho̤ woman. And I'd like to welcome everyone here tonight. Thank you for coming. This evening we're getting ready to have this discussion. I think it's much needed. And of course, as we know, it's information that everyone needs to know about because of what's happened here on our lands. And in addition to that, what I'll say is, welcome to Umó̤ho̤ country. You are in the homelands of the Umó̤ho̤ Nation, Umó̤ho̤ tribe of Nebraska. So, what I can say is, we just watched this clip, and I know that we're going to have our first part of the discussion over that. So,
right. So before we do that, I do just want to acknowledge and thank Jamie Elker, who's providing ASL interpretation for this event. And I want to note that all of our videos will have open captions. And before I turn this back over to Renee, I'd like to thank Maggie Barrett. So this event, Maggie is our community engagement manager at Nebraska Public Media. This event was her brainchild. She worked with our partners to make this event what it is this evening. So I'd like to have a round of applause for Maggie, who also sprained her ankle last. So she's had a difficult lead up to this event, and we want to acknowledge her. So.
Thank you so much. Well, we want to start off this discussion about what we had just watched here on the American Buffalo. I have a question for everyone. Have you watched the documentary? Okay. As you know, then it left a very strong impression upon everybody who's watched it. I can say that it left me in tears, and I was enraged. It took me some time to come to terms with what I had learned. Because, again, I thought I knew a lot about buffalo, but then to learn even more. So with this, I want to ask our panelists, when we're defining food sovereignty, how does this concept drive your work? I could start with you.
So I'm a storyteller. So when it comes to food sovereignty, lifting up that story is really important to me, to see positive Native stories out there. That's the reason why I became a filmmaker, was to share positive stories about Native people and us getting back to our roots. And food sovereignty is a huge part of that. That's a huge part of our intergenerational healing. Yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Indigenous food sovereignty is, of course, very, very important. But I like to remind people that it's all one thing. The buffalo and the grass, everything we eat, it's all one thing. And we really can't focus on one thing at a time. We have to focus on the whole thing. And I think that the buffalo is a great symbol of that.
Correct. We can't focus on one thing at a time, and the buffalo is a huge part of our traditional foods that was taken from us. And as an educator to our children, we do touch a little bit about that, but we also touch on the strength and resilience, the determination to persevere and come back and even stronger. And and bring that traditional food back in there, because we do have herds of buffalo on our reservation, and bringing our traditional foods into our daily lives again is a huge part of our focus. We don't focus on we know the story, we can't change the past. We can just move forward.
This is something that's changing a lot of thought at the Conservancy, which is, as we have more input from Indigenous partners, a lot of times the Conservancy has thought, this is what we should do, or this, or this, or this. And similar to what we've heard here, is it's a whole system, right? And when I think of food sovereignty, it's a human right. It's a human right to food that is healthy and culturally appropriate, that is done in a sustainable way. And so when you think about that as your definition, it's saying there's people, there's the food itself, there's the way it's made, and there's the cultural aspect. And so we have to be thinking about all of those things as one cohesive kind of circle of life, if you will. And that's when you really start to hit home what actually food sovereignty is at the end of the day.
Okay, so we're going to go into our next clip. And this is from Homecoming, which is a companion piece to the American Buffalo. And this film documents what is happening today in the realm of buffalo or bison restoration with the InterTribal Buffalo Council and the work of their associate director, Jason Valdez. He's an enrolled member of the Eastern Shoshone tribe. And in this section of the film, Jason talks about the Wind River Tribal Buffalo Initiative's accomplishments so far, and what inspired him to take on this work. So, well, let's roll with that. Huh?
We now have over 150 buffalo collectively between the two tribes, and then established the Wind River Tribal Buffalo Initiative to be a local face here to raise money to buy land, and then also help facilitate the cultural, educational, nutritional reconnection of youth and community to buffalo. It wasn't our goal to feed, but because of the tough winter and because we are on a limited landscape, we have to do that. But the goal would be is down the road, if we restore them to larger landscapes, that they can exist on their own without intervention of man or genetically manipulating them or ranching them, that this is an opportunity to see something different, see them protected under tribal law, but also exist as a wildlife species on the landscape where they can effectively create ecological change. We have tremendous wildlife habitat potential on this reservation, perhaps more than many. And so buffalo fits right into that picture. It's the only one missing from the landscape on this reservation that was here before Lewis and Clark arrived. A lot of this work that drives me goes back to being a kid and hunting with my dad, talking about why we can't hunt buffalo. My dad was a biologist, and I went on a trip with him to Africa, into Kenya and Tanzania and Uganda, and witnessed the wildebeest migration. And that was kind of an epiphany for me. So when I returned home, I had a newfound appreciation, I think, for my home and my people, my community, and realized that I needed a science background to gain the academic credentials to focus on tribal buffalo restoration. And so it's always been a vision of mine is to be able to hunt buffalo with my dad, my sons, my grandkids, in a way that was taken from us. You know, that buffalo was gone for a bit over 100 years, but that's a small window of time compared to the millennia that we've had the relationship with this animal. It's in our DNA. Most of America has been plowed up, paved over, fenced in, fenced out. And so, you know, what happened to the buffalo similarly happened to Native American people. We're now on remnants of our once former vast territories, and that's a history that, you know, American people need to understand. Our people, we're still suffering. We have, you know, high rates of diabetes and heart disease and other health-related issues from the removal of buffalo from our diet.
These are buffalo roasts that we smoked for probably about 6 hours. Native people started to starve to death because they wiped out our buffalo. They, you know, pretty much wiped out one of the most important staples in our diet, you know, for Plains Indians. And so they decided at that time, you know, to bring in rations, and that was flour and lard and coffee, sugar, and so that's what the Indians started to eat because that's all they had. And so that's when I believe that was the beginning of the end for our health as Native people, because they took that part of our life away. They stripped it from us. And that's why what Jason's doing is important, because it's bringing back some of those ways that we can learn to thrive on again.
The InterTribal Buffalo Council now has 83 member tribes across the country. That organization is 30 years old and has restored 25,000 buffalo to 65 herds in 20 states.
The full homecoming film is very powerful and available to watch on the American Buffalo website, pbs.org/American Buffalo. Well, now, Brandon, I have a question for you. What are some of the challenges facing buffalo conservation efforts today, including habitat loss, genetic diversity, and conflicts with ranching and other land uses? And how can these challenges be addressed?
Well, the first problem is that the animals aren't being stewarded by the people who have always been here. So you look at it from square one and we've already messed up, right? And so one of the things that we've been working on at the Conservancy is our bison restoration program. We've been doing it for a couple of years now, and we've been working with the InterTribal Buffalo Council to transfer animals back into the hands of tribal nations. So this year we transferred over 1,000 animals from our preserves in the US back to those nations. And I tell you that not because it's our story to tell, it's actually the story of those who are getting those animals back, right? And when you think about the prairies that are in the Great Plains, and you think about the conservation of those places or the stewardship of those places, bison are deeply, deeply integral to the success of the conservation in those areas, where when you think about the medicines that are coming up out of the ground that we've been using for thousands of years, those medicines aren't there without bison and without fire and without people. And when you look at the history of these landscapes, it's been those three things that have been working in tandem. And when colonization came around, we pretty much wiped out all three. And so now you look at the land and you're like, oh my gosh, it looks totally different. For those of you who live in this area of Umó̤ho̤, if you go back and read the old Lewis and Clark journals from when they were coming up the river, if you're in the Iowa area, you'll see all the trees that are out there. They write in their journal that they couldn't find any firewood, which means that this area was totally different at some point. And that when we took away the people and the animals and the fire that made it that way, the landscape totally changed. I'm sure others on this panel can speak, of course, to some of that as well.
Next with Dan O'Brien. In the American Buffalo film and in your book, you talk about the importance of the buffalo, not just as an animal, but also in how they impact an ecosystem. Can you expand on how that influences your approach at Wild Idea Buffalo?
Years ago, and I'm talking probably 30, 35 years ago, I worked for a conservation group out of Cornell University, putting falcons back on the cliffs of the Rocky Mountains. And I drove from Montana to Mexico, I don't know, 100 times in a 10-year period. And all the time I drove in that back and forth through the feedlots, the slaughter plants, the desolation of the Great Plains, it finally dawned on me that the one thing that is missing is buffalo. I would say this, though. I think we have a tendency as conservationists to work hard to change problems, but we usually end up working on the problems that are really just not the real problem. I think that we're talking about too many people and too much stuff. And if we're going to get buffalo back on a landscape that is balanced, we're going to have to face the real problems. We can't take it on one issue at a time. We've got too many people out here. We got too much stuff. And buffalo need a lot of space. And on our ranch, they get it, about 35 acres per animal. And I think that's the way it should be. We started that about 25 years ago with that attitude, and now we've got grouse and antelope and hundreds of bird species. And all it takes is a little time and slowing down the progress, which of course is not progress at all.
And I want to ask this question, and I know we don't have much time to answer, but this question is very important. Why do we talk about rematriation instead of repatriation?
Getting back to the story that I heard from a Lakota man, he said that one day he found what creator was. And he said that was within women, because women are creating life. And so that is one version of creator, right? And to me, that was really kind of a mind-blowing, powerful thing when he said that. That story really resonated with me, and it kind of comes, full circle in all of this. The people in my story, you'll see soon, who are taking care of these seeds that would have been extinct by now are all women. And so a lot of times we say that women are the culture keepers. And so that rematriation idea for so long has been suppressed from colonization and influence of different religions and different cultures, but it's making a resurgence.
Thank you so much. We're going to go into our next clip, and this one is an excerpt from the short film Seed Warriors, which was part of the PBS digital series Homegrown Future Visions. And it also aired on the Nebraska public media program Nebraska Stories. This short film, created by our panelist Rebekka Schlichting, focuses on the Pawnee Seed Keepers, led by Deb Echo-Hawk, who worked with Nebraska farmers to grow their heritage corn. And this excerpt starts with Deb Echo-Hawk of the Pawnee Seed Preservation Society, receiving a call from Ronnie O'Brien, a Nebraska farmer who wanted to try to plant some of their Pawnee corn.
One day, I got an unexpected call from Nebraska. That gave me hope that we could grow our corn again in our homeland.
I worked at the Archway in Kearney over I-80 that teaches a lot of history about the trails and transportation. And I had natives telling me, you really need to teach more about the 1,000 years before that. So that's how I met Deb Echo-Hawk. I wanted to start a program about the Pawnee because we're in the homeland here in central Nebraska. So wanted to have gardening as part of that because I grew up on a corn farm and I've always gardened. She sent me just 25 seeds in 2004, the first year, and I planted them like we do. We plant corn in late April here in Nebraska, so I went out and did that, and I was all excited, and it all rotted in the ground. It was too early and too cold. So the next year, she sent 25 kernels. She said, I have 25 left. This is it. I can't part with the last 25. We have to be able to show our children what it looked like once.
Ronnie O'Brien, she's my little corn sister. In fact, we gave her name in Pawnee. Yeah, I think she cried for days when that happened. We talk almost daily and sometimes several times a day. Other Nebraska farmers wanted to plant Pawnee corn too. One was Dale Fite, a man that I would later call friend.
We wouldn't be here if it wouldn't have been for the Pawnee helping my family. When they homesteaded just a mile south of here in 1869, there was a Pawnee encampment another mile south of them. It was the Pawnee, and they ended up, trading food and things with them, and it's evolved into a love affair, and like I say, in a very spiritual way. It's become, the connection with the Pawnee people. They are truly family. This is a manicuring of a precious resource from a historical and spiritual base that is teaching us how we need to be in the future. It is teaching the next generations.
To see and to hear Dale, when his great-grandparent, homesteaded this place, and how the Pawnees helped them through that winter. They felt they owed something to them Pawnees. It's pretty awesome that he still feels that way. I mean, that was a long, long time ago, and things die off, but that's still in his heart, in his family's heart, to recognize that. That really tells me a lot about him and his family, that they're really good people.
Yeah, so it really makes a nice drink, and you don't have to heat it, just infuse it.
Each fall we travel to Nebraska to pick and prepare corn for our ceremonies and to restore our traditional diet.
There's always a feeling for me when I am here with this land of being home, which in a sense, you know, maybe I feel a little bit silly to say because I've never lived here, but it's true.
I love to remind Nebraskans that we were the first corn huskers.
We're smiling more than we have in a long time. There's a little bit of teaching that goes into almost everything that we're doing. Yeah, it's been beautiful to see it all play out into a camp setting. So this year we're processing eagle corn. We've been working towards this moment for a long time to be able to serve eagle corn to the people at our dances, at our spring ceremonies, where everybody could try it, everybody could know what it tastes like.
I like the eagle corn to taste, because when we shell it, you know, we get the whole thing. We're careful about how we take the kernels off the cob. But when you cook it, you know, we'll blanch, roast it, and then take it off the cob. But then when you cook it, it turns like super round, and it just kind of pops in your mouth. And to me, it's got this really incredible nut-like taste. That's definitely my favorite. And we like it when it looks like an eagle with its wings spread out. It's fun to find that design in there and a lot of other designs. It's just like an art show every day, you know, looking at all the different varieties. Lots of prayers have gone into this corn in all phases of production, and anytime you pray brings out the healing properties of plants. We've been putting wrong foods in our bodies, so if we get back to a food that our DNA, our bodies recognize, then, you know, hey, we're gonna have healthier people. We use corn, as most tribes do, in every celebration there is, powwows, ceremonies, and there's just so much reverence to it. When we were on the verge of extinction, it was just a miracle that we found some of our corn. I mean, what an adventure it has been.
Mother corn is very, very, very sacred. To have something that was passed down generation to generation to generation, and we're still able to consume it, to taste it. It touches the soul. To realize, you know, our grandmas, you know, great-grandmas took care of this enough to supply us.
So this question I have is for you, Rebekka. What drew you to the story of the Pawnee Seed Keepers? What drew you to the story of the Pawnee, now I can't say it, Pawnee Seed Keepers?
Oh, great. So Margaret Jacobs, she's here in the audience. She's the one. She's responsible for this. And Christine Leshak, who's also in the room. They were working on this project, and I'm a part of this project called The Land Returns, and it's a bigger story about giving land back and resources back to natives. It's still in production. It's a feature film, and they said this story really needs its own, you know, story because it's so great, and it needs just more attention than the few minutes that it would get in this longer piece. And so that's how I came to make the story.
Now, in the film, the connection between the Pawnee and the Nebraska farmers who want to grow the corn and help keep this tradition going is very moving and beautiful. Brandon and Suzi, are there other examples of these partnerships happening in other arenas? And how can we keep them thriving?
With us, yes, we do. We do work with a lot of our non-native local farmers to come in and help us plant our traditional corn in the school garden, which is 7 acres. So we don't have tractors or equipment, and so they bring their equipment in, but they don't take our seed, our corn. But they are willing to help us for any advice, because our garden is organic. We call them the garden, but it's really a farm. It's all organic. So they give us as much technical assistance as they possibly can. They come in and weed it or cultivate their corn twice for a season for us. And they do that all because they want to see our school and our children and our project thrive. They don't charge the school money. They do it. I mean, they're driving their tractors quite a ways into town, and these are big farmers that don't generally use 8-row tractors. So this is the equipment that they've had prior. So it's a kind of a big deal. And they support our farmers markets. They support they come and buy our produce. They buy our value-added products. We see them at, any functions that they do. They're there spending their money and supporting it just the way they can.
Thank you.
So my primary body of work is in this realm of partnerships. And this is a relatively new area of work for the Nature Conservancy. The way I frame it to people is we're listening and learning as we build these relationships along the way. When I think about the Nature Conservancy, we haven't been the perfect organization. I'm not going to sit up here and say we're perfect, but compared to your federal agencies, we've got a relatively clean slate, and we have an opportunity to do things right the first time. And so that is a lot of my job, is making sure that if we're going to build relationships with tribal nations and be in community, that we're going to do it right. And what does that mean to do it right? It means showing up with humility, being reciprocal in our relationships, and being willing to listen and not immediately take the first step forward and say, ooh, this is what we've got, or this is what we can do. This is an amazing story up here about, some of that land back, but unfortunately it's not always like that. And so a lot of what I think about is how can groups like the Conservancy be an ally in that space? One of those ways is by getting a network of shadow buyers ready who, when there's land available to purchase, and that tribe goes to buy that land, and that landowner says, oh, for you it's 15% more, 20% more. Then they work with us, and we find a shadow buyer who's willing to come and buy that land and then transfer it. That's just one example of where we can be in partnership. There's many others, but I think the biggest takeaway is the job of nonprofits and federal agencies and larger conservation groups is really to take a step back, realize, hey, we don't know as much as we think we know, and listen to our partners and be willing to fit where we need to fit.
Dan, how do you learn from tribes in your area as you make decisions about how you will operate Wild Idea Buffalo and incorporate Native traditions?
If I hear you properly, my idea about the business that we created as a family was try to make this land as much like pre-Lewis and Clark as possible. That's a huge job because so much has changed. He even talked to people a little older than I am, and they remember the land a lot different than it is today. So, we try our best to understand how the land was originally. Of course, it was always changing, but pick a number in time, pick 1700, and say, what was it like? To learn what it was like, read, figure it out, talk to people who know, and to do everything we can to make it that way. And it's a tough, tough deal, because if you go to the Department of agriculture, the feds, how do I put this land back to grass? They start out with a list of chemicals to spray on it. So a lot of it, you have to just take it easy, and I found this out. The most important element in regenerating grasslands is time. Rest. This land has been beat to hell, and the buffalo have a way of massaging it back to life. It takes 20, 30, 40, 50 years, but it can be done, and you have to put the idea of maximum profit behind you somewhere or somehow. Just have to find a way to do it for nothing.
Thank you so much. What we're going to do next is we have one last video, and this video is a short feature about Suzi's work at Umó̤ho̤ Nation Public Schools and their farm-to-school garden program. This introduces us to the great work that she is doing to bring Native foods and traditions to young people. So, thank you.
Let's see. We have 3 acres of Indian corn, green beans, bush beans, Brussels sprout, there's potatoes, watermelon, crookneck squash, pumpkins, onions, cabbage, red cabbage, eggplant, 2,000 tomato plants, zucchini, summer squash, acorn squash, cucumbers, 1,500 pepper plants, broccoli, cauliflower, kale. I think that's about it so far. My name is Susan French, and I am the Farm to School Director at Umó̤ho̤ Nation Public Schools. I'm in a case of a Black Shoulder Buffalo clan, but our purpose within our clan was to ensure that all the people had food. So me growing organic food to provide to our community and teaching them how to grow it, it fits exactly where I'm supposed to be. I tell the students, we're going to try to be as natural as we can and teach them more about the plant, the purpose, the connection that we have with those plants. Talking to them, singing to them. Them are all part of our tradition, all of our traditional ways. Ricardo's job is to get them ready for employment and try to find them employment in our community. Well, there is no employment opportunities, and that's what the garden is doing. It's creating jobs for our students.
I need some helpers, volunteers.
We want to have a say in what we can eat, not, handed to us by the government and say, here, this is what you have. That's the whole point of growing this project. The school has the best idea. We can grow a lot of food, and we can get it out to our community. This project moved me because I saw the change. It's amazing to me. Our elders come and stop and talk about what it used to be like, what they remember in our community. I see the future in this project, our tribe's future, the impact that it can have on our tribe's health, our kids' work ethic, our kids' ability to adapt to change and shift and pivot. Just because there's a barrier doesn't mean, oh no, we have to stop and seek help. It means, all right guys, let's think outside the box. How can we fix this?
Udoshkache, Suzi. Tell us what is the background and context of your creating this program?
I just want to say I didn't create this program. I'm part of it. This came from the Umó̤ho̤ Nation Public School and JAG, Nebraska. We were the first pilot school in Nebraska to partner with JAG, one of the first. So Mr. Ricardo Ariza is sitting in the audience right there, and he is a major player in this, along with our administration, Stacy Hardy and Carrie Bappy. So this all came about, by the grace of God, we all came together, and we're missing one component, Mr. Richard Valentino. He also assisted so bad in this, but our children needed, Ricardo's job is to create employment opportunities for our students, and we don't have any. And the students decided they wanted to garden. And I guess when we do something, we just didn't do it very small. We took it head on, and we got 7 acres, and we utilized it. You kind of seen an overview of it. Besides the huge pumpkin patch we have, we also had a huge watermelon patch and 3 acres of Indian corn and 11,000 square feet of just vegetables that we, first year, we did a little bit of canning and gave back to the community. Mostly we gave it back to the community. We did have farmers markets. Second year, we had more farmers markets and gave a lot to our elders. And then this is our 3rd year and final, we just closed our 3rd year. And we did a lot of value-added products. We created pickles and pesto and salsa and tomatoes and dehydrated peppers. And I mean, we did a lot of things in the classroom, in the culinary department with our students. So every year we are adding a new component to this. So it's just been completely amazing.
And how can we all support the passing down of respectful and restorative cultural practices to the next generation? But also, how can we support your program?
Obviously, to keep this program going, it's going to not just be the cost of the district. We do pay our students, so we have a GoFundMe page, I think, or we have a platform page where we can get donations. We also are trying to write grants, and we have a Facebook page. It's called, we're tying it to the Umó̤ho̤ Nation Public School Facebook page, so you will be able to find everything about us on there, and it'll be up to date. I know we're working on that. The support is, unless you guys have any farming equipment in your backyards, it's generally monetary too, and it all does go to pay our children. They work unbelievably. Our kids show up at 8 o'clock and they are in our garden with smiles, no cell phones because we make them turn them in, and they work. And if you know anything about any tribal schools or schools in general, kids these days, they all have the phones. But this one was a hard one to give up that phone, and they do it every day for us with no problems. And then on top of that, they're smiling and they're laughing, and they're working together, and they complete the task at hand with grace. And yes, it's hard. It's very hard. But we had a tremendous amount of produce this year, and they had to hand water that garden because our well went out the first week.
How? Okay. Well, I would like to, I want to come back to the idea of rematriation. So both the Pawnee Seed Keepers program and the Farm to School Garden program are led by women. How are grassroots women-led organizations in some ways really powering the food sovereignty movement? And anyone can answer, but especially the ladies.
As I said in the video, I am in Nkesibe. My clan is in Nkesibe, and that is a Black Shoulder Buffalo clan. And one of our before we were colonized, one of our clan's duties was to make sure that our people were fed. I am totally believe this is exactly where I am supposed to be, because that is my job, is to make sure this garden grows and flourishes, and we do give back a lot to our elders, our community, our children. That's something I believe in wholeheartedly. So, I believe it's just something that it's my place in this world. I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing.
So I can't speak for Deb Echo-Hawk, who runs the Pawnee Seed Preservation Society. Her story is in the first half of this film. It really talks more about her background, although she is very, very much a humble person, and she would never say that she leads this program. She did not want me to make her the main character of this film, but I told her we have to have a main character so it will relate to the audience, and so she bared with me, and we got there, but she is not at all wanting to be in the spotlight for this. I can't speak for her, but from what I've seen from her story, it's kind of fallen into her lap, and it's kind of grown from there. And it's not just her. She has a team, and her daughter is doing amazing things as well, and she's a filmmaker as well. And they have interns, and so they have elders working with young people, and it's intergenerational. And it's really amazing how a long time ago, this didn't make it into the film, but a long time ago, the corn was starting sort of in the South, more like Southern Central America, and started bringing its way up, and it was all through women. So women were bringing these seeds to other tribes, and then they would share it. They say, this is how you plant the corn, this is how you take care of it, and then the next generation of women, or the next community of women, would go and share it with another community. And so it was really a women's empowerment movement at that time, a long, long, long time ago. I wish that could have made it through the film, but it unfortunately did not.
And, just to add to that, I just feel that with everything that's happening with rematriation, it covers just about every area that our women had roles in traditionally, especially before colonization. So I think that with our movement with food sovereignty, this has become the forefront, that the women began to step forward as the seed keepers and also as the historians. So I just wanted to make that point very quickly. I think now it's time that we can move into our question and answer. And we want to hear from everyone here. If you have some questions, we have of course, we have the traveling mics here. So, let's start in. Anyone have any questions to ask? Burning questions that you never get to ask, ever? Ricardo.
This question's for Suzi. We were blessed with an opportunity for the Mayan community to come and visit and share their teachings with us. And one of their elders, she spoke of the creation story of the Mayans. She spoke of the corn story. And then Lisa Drum from the Umó̤ho̤ Nation, she shared our Umó̤ho̤ corn story and creation story. And you were there. What was that like for you to have nation-to-nation sharing in that way?
First, it was a very much of an honor to have the Mayan people even come and visit our garden. It was the first year, and it was amazing to me that I I've been doing community foods for 10 years before I took this job, and I can tell you the history of our Native people is a lot of the food that you guys eat today came from us. So to hear that the way that they were farming their corn was pretty much the exact same way that we were farming our corn, but we had never ever met each other, was very. I mean, we were all we as natives, everything's circular. We are all related, and so that just kept proving the point. We are truly all related. At some point, the circle. It just proved to me we were there at some point, met each other somehow, and was brought there. The tradition was almost the same.
Any more? Oh, sorry.
So my question is for Suzi. It's kind of a couple of questions, but you mentioned that the well had malfunctioned at the beginning of the season. Like traditionally, how was your crops watered? Because like I'm from the Hopi tribe in Arizona, and we're dry farmers. So for me, I'm interested to know how corn is grown here, opposed to in Arizona, where in the desert, and we wait for the rain. So I want to know, did they have wells or irrigation systems from the river, or how was that done?
They grew the Three Sisters, and every family plot pre-colonization had next to the creeks. So their gardens were grown closer to creeks, and that usually the Umó̠ho̠s had it down where they only weeded their gardens twice a year because they went to a summer buffalo hunt, and then they used sister squash to cover the ground, but they put it in a mound of four stalks. So, and it must have drew water from the creek, moisture of the creek beds, and they come back every year, and it was like a family plot, so that plot was that family's.
And then, so my second question was, you said your clan is the bringer or the provider, to grow crops or, provide food for the tribe. As I guess, learning from you, do you mentor other young women in your clan to continue these traditions, or is that a separate, thing you do, or is somebody else in charge of that?
So, in our tribe, the Encase Bay people we were one of them to make sure that every family got food from the buffalo hunt or something, that everybody was fed. So in today, present day, since the buffalo are no more and there's no, we take on, the Encase Bay women take on the marking of the cake at a ceremony or something that represents that part of our culture, our past traditions. So we mark the cakes.
I've been interested in the Susan LaFleche Pequot Hospital that's being renovated in Wald Hill. And I was wondering if you've thought about, they're talking about planting medicinal plants or plants that the Indians used in that. Have you ever thought, or is there any movement to do any of that kind of plantings?
Actually, at our school, we have an outdoor classroom with a naturalist. Her name is Dr. Brenda Murphy, and she does have a medicine garden out in the outdoor classroom. She works with with kindergarten through 6th grade primarily, and it's a daily special. So she teaches them a lot about the medicines and the outdoors in elementary school. But yeah, as the Susan Bacot Center, they have approached and met and taught and discussed like the what they would like to see in theirs and assistance in planting them. But yeah, we do foraging, and I can identify plants with our students. But as far as using them as medicine, that is not my place.
I wanted to ask about, since you brought it up, I recently was speaking with the Umó̤ho̤ elder, Richard Lastly, and we were talking about milkweed and how I mentioned that I haven't had it for so long, and he said it's hard to come about because where it grows back home, that it's no good because of the pesticides. And so with you mentioning the medicinal plants, it's something that, I'm very in tune to because I really believe that, so when years ago I partook in having milkweed soup, I was going through some body ailments and for 3 months, I didn't have a problem. So I was like, wow, that really worked. So I was just kind of curious how to get milkweed. And then being in the city, it's really hard that I'm not home to. So if there's a way to get a plant program here in the OPS for the Native students here, that would be kind of a cool idea to bring your program and start having Umó̤ho̤s to have an area to have a community garden for the Umó̤ho̤s and have medicinal plants organically.
Oh, that would be very awesome. I do know that there's an Indian center here in Umó̤ho̤, right? No?
Living in the urban areas, it's hard to find milkweed that isn't destroyed by pesticides. So usually, like, I live in Lincoln, so we go harvest our milkweed at like places like 9 Mile Prairie, which is, they don't use pesticides there and so forth. So I'd say find those natural reserves, and Brandon might be a good person to talk to connect with, especially around here. Yeah.
One thing I will mention, and I'm really proud that this is happening at the Conservancy here in Nebraska, is if you are someone that likes to come out and harvest medicine, this group is going to get the first kind of glimpse of this. Next year, I've been working really hard to make sure that our preserves in the state are accessible for our Indigenous partners. And so what I mean by that is not like, oh, you want to come here, sign a piece of paper that signs away your life. It's such a slap in the face in my mind to say, these are my homelands, and for me to just be on them, I have to sign a liability waiver. So I'm still getting it through legal. But our legal department has been very willing to work with me. And so we'll have a program where when Indigenous folks want to come and utilize our land, whether it's for getting those medicines, for cultural use, for ceremonial use, just give us a call 24 hours in advance, right? That way, in case maybe we're doing a prescribed burn and there's going to be a bunch of smoke or something like that, yeah, maybe it's not the best day to come, but other than that, it's really not even our land. And so we need to be thinking critically, both here in Nebraska, but across our land in North America. How do we make sure that these lands are open and accessible in a way that actually makes sense to tribal nations across the U.S.? So we're kind of starting that effort here in Nebraska, and hopefully, as I continue my work, it will grow far beyond just this state.
Also, you have Fontenelle Forest. And by all means, I would pressure them about opening to Native people to access the medicines that they have growing there, because I know they do. So again, just to say that, living in Lincoln, we do have those agreements with 9 Mile Prairie, Spring Creek Prairie, and all these other natural reserves, conservation, so on and so forth. And they realize that these are some of the few places that still maintain our natural medicines. Because unfortunately, like on our reservation, the Umó̠ho̠ Reservation, it's been plowed over for European agricultural systems. And what has that done to our land? Well, we don't have access to our natural medicines anymore. So that's the purpose of this work, that, you see that we're all taking upon ourselves. We're all committed to this way. So I wanted to make that, make that known. Yes, by all means, this is the time, like I said, if you have burning questions and you've never asked Indians before, this is your chance.
This is for Brandon and Dan. I know USDA has programs through like the College of Public Health for safety for working with tribal communities with bison. So what do you guys, you can't just give somebody some bison and say good luck, because they're bigger than a cow and can be irascible. So what do you do to help people once you've given them the bison?
Could you hear that okay?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I got it. One of the things that I've been on my soapbox about at the Conservancy is, look, if we're going to do the transfer of animals, it can't stop there. It can't be this one siloed thing where we go, oh, hey, return to your relatives, see you later. It's nice working with you. It has, those relationships have to continue. And it's not just the relationships, it's also thinking about when you reintroduce bison, because of the world we live in now, where you do need fence, unfortunately, you need the fence, you need the water sources, you need the corral systems, and those things take time and energy and money to get set up. And so if we're gonna say, look, we're gonna restore bison, it's not just about the bison. Again, just like we talked about with the food sovereignty, it's a whole system. And so we need to be thinking critically about how do we get the infrastructure in place, how do we make sure that those folks that want to work with the bison feel like they are enabled to do so, and then how do we make sure we get fire back on that landscape as well, so that the prairies and the bison and the fire can act as one whole unit working in tandem. We're working on it, and we need to be better in that regard, but I sure hope and think that we will be in the future.
I think that this is a problem. I know that some bison have come from parks and were mistreated. And I think that it's more than just the animal itself. If the animal isn't free to move around and to be with antelope and prairie dogs and 100 different kinds of grasses, I'm not even sure it's a buffalo. I think that a buffalo standing in a cage in a zoo, to me, is not a buffalo. I once wrote a book about peregrine falcon. Peregrine falcon we think of as a bird that flies very, very fast. What if it can't fly? Is it still a peregrine falcon? I think that's a good question, and I think if a buffalo can't move, at least a few miles a day, that it's not really a buffalo. And so simply to give buffalo to people who like them doesn't help. We have to do the whole system. And it starts with the grass. It probably starts with the soil itself, because most of it's been screwed up, as we all know. That's all I got to say.
Can you hear me without that?
Yeah.
Okay. As a historian who's basically taught that the Native Americans saved the first Europeans coming to this new world by showing them how to plant corn and how to fertilize it with the fish of the area that they had. Has there been any linkage between the corn that the Native Americans planted here and any byproduct from a buffalo that could help or that would lead to the fertilization of that corn in that type of a relationship? Has there been any research on that at all, or am I clear out, or did we use fish around here, which means the corn had to be planted pretty close to the water?
I don't know, and we do have an issue in our lives up in South Dakota with I don't know. I think that's an interesting idea. We have an issue with our business and our lives up in South Dakota. We have a lot of offal that's left, and we're composting it. But I've never heard of anybody actually using it for fertilizer. If some historian in the audience here has some information about that, it'd be very interesting to me, because I think it would probably do a similar thing that as a fish does in the hole with corn and beans.
Well, my question is, if you're now putting the buffalo on land that is not fertilized and not, it would be a cleaner byproduct coming out of the buffalo to go to the corn. And so if you're talking about medicines and different things like that, if the whole system that we're talking about here could be progressed in a cleaner way, then there, in my mind, would be a possibility that you're opening a huge area for the Native Americans in order to show the rest of the world the medicines. That's just a supposition is all I'm making.
I mean, I think it's really interesting, but you do have to realize, and I think we all need to realize, what it's like to put a half a dozen buffalo down in a pasture that's 50 miles from the nearest gravel or paved road, and to get, the byproducts, et cetera, around, traveling around would be a major and very expensive headache.
So in our 7-acre garden, I do use manure tea. It was originally from my horses, from my farm, my horses aged, that we piled up and aged, and because I knew that I didn't give them any chemicals, it was pretty clean. We have been invited down to collect the patties for our bison, for our tribal bison, and put it into and make manure tea or add it into our compost pile. This is only our 3rd year, but we're working on it. But yes, I have used manure tea and fish fertilizer on our corn, all of our crops. and teaching the children, you know, that was one of the, probably the best experiences ever, because it was funny. It was one of the, it was not funny, but it was funny. And they didn't understand it at first, but they definitely realized the difference from when we fed it and when, within a week.
Invite them for tea.
I'm just going to get one last.
Yeah, this is a question for Dan, and I'm just interested in the genetic lines of buffalo like yours. If I'm understanding, you know, with the mass slaughter of bison in the late 1800s, that the remaining ones were primarily in Yellowstone. And I mean, do you have any idea if the ones you have follow that genetic line? And with the, whatever it was, 20-some tribal entities that are raising bison, are they follow the genetic lines of those and how they compare?
I know you, don't I?
I don't think so.
No? Okay. Here's what I did, and this is 35 years ago, before the genome was really figured out. I bought my stock, and it was not very many at that time, 50 head or something like that, but I got it from as many different places as I could. Our operation does not have the money to test all our buffalo for genetic purity. It's a big project. We would never even come close to being able to pay for it. What we do is, and we don't put our buffalo through a chute. I mean, that's the last thing we do, is put a buffalo through the chute. I think it's cruel, to be honest with you. So that takes a veterinarian, and you got to do all kinds of nipping and squeezing and prodding and all that kind of stuff, which we don't like to do. And it's too expensive for us. So the answer is we can't do that. But here's what we can do. We go around to herds that the Crane Trust being one of them. You know, they bring their buffalo in and they poke them and squeeze them and test them and all that stuff. And so we buy bulls from them. They've already been poked and squeezed, and they, you know, and they're pure buffalo. We take those. We only bring buffalo one way on our ranch. We don't trade them back and forth. No buffalo leaves our ranch alive. And we don't bring any buffalo in that have not been tested. And just, that's not a perfect way to do it, but eventually our buffalo have to be, just by mathematics, have to become more and more and more pure. And I would bet, I have nothing to back this up, but I would bet that you'd have a hard time finding a buffalo that wasn't 99% pure in our 900 buffalo. And that's that's the poor boy's way to do it. Ted Turner could do it a different way. We can't.
Well, we know we could continue this conversation for hours on end, but now we've come to this time, and I want to thank each one of our panelists this evening for restoring Indigenous food sovereignty. Please give them a round of applause. And again, my name is Renée Souci, and it's been a pleasure to be a part of this and to lead this conversation. But once again, let's acknowledge our panel. We have Rebekka Schlichting, Dan O'Brien, Suzi French, and Brandon Cobb. Thank you. We also want to thank Jamie Elker. She's providing the ASL interpretation this evening. And we extend our thanks to the Durham Museum, the Nebraska Public Media, and Vision Maker Media for organizing this event this evening. Now, thank you, to each one. So what we can leave with you, that the hope here is that each one of you, having heard the panelists, having watched the film clips, that now you've become aware of the kinds of practices that Native people and our allies are utilizing to restore this land. Take this with you out into the rest of the world and share that. This is a good model to continue. So again, as an educator, that's what I'm always teaching in my lectures. I tell my students, what I'm sharing with you is something that you won't get from anywhere else. And I always leave this with my students. If you can leave this room and forget about everything I've said, or in this case, everything that everybody said, then there's something wrong. Yes. Remember that we want this knowledge to be shared because it's important for our future generations. And what we say is the future is indigenous, just like the past was indigenous. The future is indigenous because of the kinds of practices that we have retained and that we are restoring. That's what I can leave with you this evening. I thank you so much again. Umó̤ho̤, I thank you. And in closing, my elder here, I want to speak Spanish and say tío, but my uncle, my negiha, says, close it out with a short prayer. So I'm going to do that. So in that way, we're closing it out in a good way, and I'll do that very quickly. I don't want to be like all long-winded and be sitting here rest of the night. So again, ewide wongide, all my relations. Wakonda wiblaha, wakonda idado gruba udoshkache. Creator, thank you. Everything you do is good. Tonight, we came here to share our words, to share our thoughts, our feelings, to watch these films together. So I pray this way that everybody who's here, who has participated, who's heard everything, that they can go from here with a good heart, with good thoughts, and that they can carry this message out into the world. This is what I pray for tonight. I thank you, Wakanda, Creator. I thank you for all our blessings. And I pray for good health, happiness, and understanding. Wiblaha, ewide wongide, all my relations. So thank you so much again for coming. And again, give a round of applause and, as we always say, we are adjourned. Carry on, we always say.